We're bringing healthy back. Them other bros don't know about the facts. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magic of Metabolic Health podcast once again, where optimized metabolic health is our goal, and we are here to get you there. My name is Amelia Wood, and I am a food first personal trainer and metabolic health coach. And here at the Magic of Metabolic Health podcast, we are building a village that encompasses every part of who you are. We release guilt and shame and the quest for perfection and show you how self-efficacy and knowing your why are crucial tools in sustainable behavior change and optimizing your metabolic health. Today is episode 11, and I am delighted and stoked to welcome Kristen Falcon. Hey, Kristen.
Hey.
Thanks for being here. Today, Dr. Fumi is out of the office, so I get you all to myself. And I just have a little introduction about Kristen. She is a Blackfeet tribal member from the Blackfeet Nation, which is located near Glacier National Park in Montana. She is a traditional foods and diet researcher and is also a co-owner of an ecotourism business called Backpackers Ferry in Glacier National Park. She is also a traditional foods harvester and hunter, and she resides on the Blackfeet Nation with her partner, 2 children, and 2 dogs. Mm-hmm. Thanks for being here, Kristen. Hello.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so it's been a while. I think we met back in 2022 at the Living Breath Indigenous Foods Symposium at University of Washington when you presented there.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've been patiently waiting to get you here to hear all about the awesome stuff that you do. I loved your presentation there. But we'll get into all the nitty-gritty details in a little bit. So I guess first a little bit about you. I did share, where you're from, but have you lived in Montana your whole life, or have you traveled or lived other places?
Yeah. So right now currently living within the Blackfeet Nation. I haven't always lived here, and that's kind of a story itself. But I grew up always in Montana. I grew up with my mom and my brother. My mom was always in and out of school, so we spent a lot of time in the Missoula, Montana area, which is also historical or ancestral area to the Blackfeet Nation as well. But yeah, lived over there. I also resided after my mom graduated from university. We went over to the Flathead Indian Reservation, and that's called the your dog in the background. That's
I have a dog too.
Yeah, I got 2 of them outside. They're trying to come in and whatnot. But after she graduated, we moved over to CSKT. It's called the Confederated Flathead, Salish, and Kootenai Tribal Nation. And so my mom, she worked over there as a drug and alcohol counselor, working with the youth. So I spent some of my elementary schooling over there, as well as middle school, and graduating from high school over there. Kind of transitioned between over there, Missoula, and then spending summers with my dad's side of the family and some of my mom's side of the family here in Blackfeet Nation. Yeah.
But wow, yeah. Cool. I don't know if I told you that I was born in Missoula.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. How long did you stay over there?
We were there, I was there 8.5 years-ish, from birth to 8. And my parents had been there a few more years, like 3 years, I think, beforehand, before I came out into the world. But my grandparents lived in northern Idaho, so we would go back and forth between Idaho and Missoula a lot. And then when we moved out to the Seattle area, we would still go visit Idaho, Montana, and had a lot of family friends. So Missoula is very close to my heart. I love Big Sky Country and that whole giant mass of land that is just a beautiful place on this earth. So, Sorry about the dog interruption.
No, no worries.
Usually he's very well behaved when I'm recording, but today he did his thing. So you talked about where you grew up, and since we're going to be talking about ancestral nutrition today, I wanted to ask what your most common meal was growing up. And since you moved around a bit, maybe it changed, but if we all had kind of typical meals when we were kids, and I'm just curious, how your family raised you and what kind of food environment and what kind of stuff you ate.
Yeah, so definitely we didn't know too much about nutrition, I would say. My mom being a single mom and also as well as being in school. And then she was also doing like her practitioner hours. And then she was always working with different youth in different youth homes. So a lot of times it was fast meals, a lot of box meals, and especially a lot of commodity meals, is what I grew up on. Um,
Can
we,
you, sorry, can you explain commodity meals for people who might not be familiar with that?
yeah, definitely. So commodity meals are kind of for more low income families. It comes with, just, it's mostly processed food, but it comes with kind of your basic. Some of it is meat, like mostly canned meat, like canned beef, canned chicken, canned tuna. Then you're not really getting as much fresh foods. Once in a while, you do get fresh foods in there, but for the most part, it's a lot of canned fruit, canned vegetables, a lot of box meals, powdered milk, powdered eggs. Really processed, highly processed cheese, things like that. Yeah, so yeah, commodity meals are more or less for the low income side of families. It's what a lot of kind of tribal nations, a lot of lower kind of, I'm not even thinking of the word right now, but just kind of what those lower income families are being able to eat.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So is it like a subsidized
Mm-hmm.
sort of meal plan, almost like food stamps, but a little bit different?
A little bit different. I mean, yeah, you apply for it, you kind of put in how much you make, kind of the needs of your family, and then from there, they're able to give you kind of that subsidized amount of how much to take per, family size. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And so let's see, where should we go next? Well, do you want to talk about nutrition now, or do you want to get into sort of your career paths?
Maybe let's talk a little bit more about kind of just how I got into maybe the research of why, because then I could
Sure.
really tie into the reason for the commodity foods and then moving around and
Gotcha. Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Let's talk a little bit about ancestral nutrition or nutrition in general and how maybe the dynamics of how you grew up impacted what you do today and anything that has to do with like school. Did you go to school for nutrition or, maybe just share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, um, growing up, like I said, growing up off of commodities and not really having an idea of what nutritional values were within our family. And then um, kind of growing up also away from our tribal nation, we were kind of felt like just in a different world. So even though Missoula is probably like a 4.5 hour drive from the Blackfeet Nation, definitely a world away. Even CSKT is a little bit closer to Missoula, to the Blackfeet Nation, roughly around 2.5 hours. It still was very different unless you're actually within the community. So my mom wanting to she really wanted to cut ties with the community just because of a lot of different traumatic events that happened. And she really wanted to keep us kids kind of safeguarded and not interacting with that trauma. But however, the thing about trauma is that it doesn't matter if you are still in that area. It tends to follow you around wherever you go. So growing up, we had to, me and my brother, we did have to deal with a lot of uncertainties and a lot of different traumas and whatnot, which really led me into the work that I do today. So growing up without that education, without those strong family ties, without those strong family connections, with my family, and kind of being kind of in this little weird bubble and whatnot, it really, growing up, it made this disconnection that I had. And it had like this really big feeling within inside of me of just kind of not necessarily loss, but like a gap that needed to be filled. And I couldn't ever really explain that pulling sensation that I was getting. So I would go and spend summers, with my father, with my grandmother and my cousins and whatnot on the Blackfeet Nation throughout the summers. But still, we weren't necessarily all the time receiving the type of education to be, on the land and working with our traditional plants and medicines. A lot of that, it came throughout the years of growing up and then into my adulthood. And then especially in my adulthood, really reaching for that information. But yeah, so growing up, when a child is getting those different traumatic events, it starts to stunt different things in their lives. And it definitely stunted things in my life. And so when I started to get into adulthood, I was, I wasn't reaching for much healthy things. It was definitely a part of me. Like I definitely did a lot of hiking, did a lot of, working with some different traditional plants and medicines with my mom, other grandparents and aunties and uncles and whatnot, but I wasn't getting it as frequent. So when I was getting into adulthood, I was going after, things that would help me distract myself from, kind of the things that I was trying to not burden myself with, or things that really hindered on my subconscious. So a lot of like partying, a lot of drinking, toxic relationships, toxic friendships, just kind of going into a really bad path there. And, seeing peers, in my 20s that are, going to college, and they were doing all of these amazing things. And, I felt like I was just still like stuck in this kind of chaotic world. And I really wanted out of it at a certain point, really, really wanted out of it. So I did start going to school, and I thought that maybe that would help. But of course, life would catch up to me again, and I would pretty much self-sabotage myself. And it wasn't until I really started kind of pushing myself to be not necessarily, I wanted to join like therapy, but like therapy wasn't working for me. And what I would notice is that actively moving my body and being out in the mountains, whether it was in the mountains of being in Flathead or being on Blackfeet Nation, or kind of even in Missoula or wherever I was noticing how that played an effect on me. And then also, in my teenage years, I helped work with a summer program. And this summer program, it worked with 7-year-olds to 18-year-olds. And the part of the program was to work with these different kids. They would come in the morning. We would do traditional food education with them. We would provide all healthy meals in the morning, for snacks, for lunch. And that was starting to kind of turn my gears of how people interacted with these foods and how people interacted with being out on the land. And so those were kind of my teenage years. So while this mischief and chaos was going on too, I still had this like centering part of me that knew that this worked. And I've seen it worked. And so working with these students that would come on this summer camp, feeding them, like actively working with these traditional foods, working with these whole and organic foods, learning different recipes, because in my childhood, we didn't really work with those recipes. We worked with a lot of the box foods, a lot of canned foods, things like that, and then really starting to really engage in nutrition. And then what we would do with the students too is that after, we would be done doing hands-on education and learning around nutrition values, around the foods in that area, then we would go out and we would go either huckleberry pig or dig bitterroot, or learn about smoking salmon and things like that. So I was learning more about our indigenous foods, but it wasn't necessarily my foods, within the way that our people worked with foods. So that always kind of hindered on me as well. And so leaving that job, doing that for a few different summers, and really, I started really enjoying working with our youth. And I was working with people, too, that were my age as well. But just working with our community in general, like I noticed how good that felt and how whole that felt, and sharing these different experiences. Because I'm not the only Native kid that's been through trauma. It's a ton of Native children that have been through trauma, and working together and learning about these different foods and ways of life, it really started to lift my spirit up, which kind of brought me into, later in my adulthood, taking school seriously, especially after I had my son around the 23 years old. I really wanted to have a different life for him, completely from him growing up as a baby to all the way into his childhood. I just wanted it to all be different. I wanted to provide him with the education of what it's like to have not only a healthy parent, but a healthy environment. And whether that meant mentally healthy, physically healthy, spiritually healthy, I wanted to make sure that I broke that cycle within, our family, to be able to make sure that he fully had this beautiful life ahead of him, something that he wouldn't have to, go back and seek healing for, seek therapy for, and whatnot. I just wanted a clean slate for him. So I worked my ass off to really heal, or to, be in that healing process. So I went to Montana State University at the time, and I was going for business and Native American studies. However, the concept of food sovereignty really started to kind of hone in, and I wasn't yet aware of everything that was going on the Blackfeet Nation that was going on with food sovereignty. I was paying attention to a lot of what was going on within Southern tribes or California tribes, and starting to hear that, that tag in food sovereignty, and what does that even mean? So also, I heavily use myself as an experiment. So I grew up with ADHD, borderline personality disorder, and a lot of that, I never wanted to be not only a mother, but I didn't want to be a human that was used to taking, medications to solve this. I wasn't a person that trusted in the Western medicine. I saw what it did to family members, to their brain chemistry. And I didn't want to do that for myself. And I did not want to do that for my family. And so I wanted to take the most natural, processed way of how to mitigate through these different mental health challenges that were straight symptoms from my trauma. And so starting to really look at the root of my trauma, look at what type of symptoms that gave me in these different mental health challenges that we have today. And I wanted to, really kind of start from there. And then, I didn't really think that me doing that myself, using myself as a guinea pig, would then later on go on to the work that I do today, that helping other folks with these different disorders or mental health challenges, or just even helping people reconnect to identity, to self, to land, to culture. I never thought that using myself as a guinea pig would start that way. But so at Montana State University, I started doing a lot of the food sovereignty research on my own, and then as well as connecting with my tribal nation. Now, because of not being kind of safeguarded away from my tribal nation and a lot of my family and a lot of those connections. It did hinder to the point where I had to make all those connections with myself. So while I was going to school at Montana State, I was starting to reach for different family members to gain those connective or those connections and really start to gain that identity because throughout my childhood into adulthood, I really felt that pulling sensation, like that really strong, like there was just something missing and I could not get my finger on it no matter how hard I tried. But it really started to close in and start to feel whole once I was making those connections again with my family, with my identity, with everything, what makes a Blackfeet person Nisadopi, and that's what we call our people. Is we call ourselves the real people. Really working with all aspects of being human, whether it's with the land, whether it's with the stars, whether it's with our animals, and really being the first scientists or the first philosophers of the land, and also being able to have that connection and relationship with the land in a very respectful way. So that's what was starting to kind of close up that gap that I was feeling within myself. So really put myself out there to different folks that were doing food sovereignty work. There was a program that I learned about called the Agricultural Resource Management Plan. That was heavily being worked on by a man named Lauren Bergrattler. And I jumped at the opportunity when he asked if I would like to work up there. So of course, like I needed to put myself actually back home and be with my people and to see where that goes. And so that really transpired into many, many different opportunities that I just did not believe that was going to even be in my corner. So it just opened up a crazy amount.
Wow. What was his name that was involved with the agricultural resource plan?
Yeah, Agricultural Resource Management Plan, ARMP. His name is Lauren Bergrattler.
I would love to help our audience just learn more. So maybe later we can, you can send me a link or something to that information. Although it was a while ago, maybe there's some other stuff online that we can share
Mm-hmm.
so people can learn.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. So quite, quite a childhood, quite a turn into adulthood for you. And one of the things that stuck out for me listening to you share is that moment or the moments that you had of knowing that you want to break the cycle yourself. And you didn't have all the answers, but you knew what wasn't going to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Staying in the patterns or the habits that were destructive or self sabotaging, which I think a lot of humans can relate to, right? Is we might want to be better or get better, but it's really hard to work through trauma, and it's really hard to learn to love yourself, especially when there's not always the guidance that you need or the guidance that you want from traditional sources, right? Like certain family members or community members. And it sounds like you really continue to root yourself in building healthy community, healthy families, um, healthy bodies, right? Uh, all of your work with ancestral nutrition and you mentioned struggling with ADHD, and it seems like that might be connected to the food that you eat. And I'm curious if you want to share a little bit. You talked earlier about the commods that you grew up with, but how do you eat now? And have through your process of, research or just learning about ancestral nutrition and practices and things, how has that influenced your mental health, and what have you found to help your mental health, like besides maybe the traditional stuff that people do, like go to counseling or journal about it? Like, I'm a big believer in food as medicine, for any ailment, whether it's a physical condition or a mental condition.
Mhm.
Do you want to share about that maybe?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what I've looked into so far is, I mean, most of our foods already are so processed. And we don't think about how that affects us, I guess. So one of the things I really like to go into is how energy really affects us, and food energy really affects us. But yeah, so a lot of our processed foods, we don't realize of the stagnant energy that we are consuming. So oftentimes, like if we're eating cattle, if we're eating hamburgers, steaks, macaronis, different carbohydrates, a lot of different box foods, we're not necessarily thinking about where that food comes from. And we're not thinking about how that food was handled. We're not thinking about how that food was grown. So let's take an example of like your hamburger. We're not really necessarily, when we're eating that hamburger, we're kind of just mostly thinking about we have hunger and we need to solve that. So let's eat, consume that. And then, we don't think too much about like if we feel irritable, if we feel tired, if we feel sluggish, if we feel sad afterwards. We're not necessarily thinking about that. And then, really kind of looking at, well, maybe it was the food I was eating or such. So if you think about how cattle are raised, a lot of times they're being raised in an area where it's very enclosed. They're not eating the freshest grass, not eating the freshest hay. And so they're kind of just ingesting what they're given. And then when they go to feedlots, oftentimes they're corn finished or they're soy finished. And not only that, the process of getting them to the feedlot is one thing. It's, those calves that are being taken away from their mothers, they're already fearful, they're anxiety filled, they don't know where they're going, even though that we believe that they are, a lot of times that they're dumb animals and that they're unaware. They are very, very aware of their surroundings, of what's going on. And these animals do have feelings. And so when they're going into these feedlots, they're already having these different anxiety filled feelings. And then they get, slaughtered. And we don't think that those emotions, those feelings are put into that meat. And so then when we're eating that meat, we're not thinking about maybe that we're eating something that had, fear when it passed away. Or even think about the grains that we're eating. When these different farmers are farming their area, there's no nutrients in the soil after continuously working with it, season after season, and not allowing that soil to rest, to regain nutrients, to provide native plants in that soil. So therefore we're eating very, very low vibrational foods. And then, we're wondering why we're having these different feelings of anxiety, of sluggish, tiredness, depression and whatnot. And that really started to kind of turn the gears in my head of what was going on with like my own ADHD is, we were eating a lot of not only processed foods, but these canned foods, these box foods and whatnot. And that it wasn't giving the best energy. So it wasn't until really working with our traditional foods. And what I noticed is that when I'm working with like our berries, our roots, when my fingers are in the dirt, I'm not just taking a part of our people. We never take, we're always asking, and it's a reciprocal relationship that is going on. So if whether we're hunting, whether we are harvesting different plants, medicines, things like that, we are always setting forth, a prayer, you know, asking that, when we take this plant, that we are using this plant to help nutrition nourish ourselves, to help think clearer, to help move, more lighter, and that we're also taking this education and we're spreading it amongst our families, our communities. And so that's kind of the give and take relationship of asking for these different animals or different, when we're harvesting these different plant medicines, that we have that reciprocal. So for one, that really kind of honed me into that, all these different plants, and animals and whatnot, everything is energy, and everything comes from energy. All of these things are living organisms. And so speaking to them as if you are in relationship with them. And that does sound a little bit weird, and it does sound a little bit like tree hugger type for people that aren't, within tribal nations or not indigenous or don't, necessarily think that way. It kind of sounds really weird or witchy or just foreign as is. But talking to your food, talking to your water, those enzymes are alive. And when you're ingesting them, they're also going to be involved in you. They're also going to take part of your cell matter. And so this area is special, the Blackfeet Nation, because we've been in this area since time immemorial. Our indigenous homelands spread all the way to North Saskatchewan up in Canada, all the way southern to the Yellowstone River down in Wyoming. So we had this huge landmass that we always took care of for thousands and thousands of years. And so we believe that this land holds a crazy amount of energy still, and holds a crazy amount of memories as well. So, our people, we were taken away from being able to work with our land, with the park coming in, the Glacier National Park, with the railroad systems coming in, with the Dawes Act and different settlers coming in. It just broke up our different family units. It broke up the way that we were able to get food. The settlers were coming in and killing off all the bison so that we didn't have our regular practices to our food to help nourish ourselves and to keep that education and that relationship going. And so these last 150 or so years, 200 years, that really there's been a huge disconnection. And that's why we're seeing a lot of autoimmune diseases, chronic diseases, a lot of mental health challenges, a lot of that being because we are disconnected from our identities, our food, our culture, and a huge part of it is our land. We were always, for thousands and thousands of years, stewards of this land, and we still are, but there is a huge amount of disconnection to that. And so noticing, just being able to, when I have my hands in the dirt, when I am working with these different plants, speaking with them, and then, ingesting them and feeling just so much lighter, that I can actually focus on different things, and that I can work through the different ADHD symptoms and tendencies, and to be able to actually slow down and to really take knowledge of my surroundings, myself, how I feel afterwards with eating these different foods, and and just kind of how that plays into my life.
A lot of that resonated with me on a few different levels. And I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but my relatives have, some of my close relatives. And then I've always wondered if I have ADHD or ADD, because I know that women don't always present the same way, and our symptoms or signs are a bit different. Like, you imagine ADHD like crazy loud, like talking really fast and never slowing down type of kid or person. And I mean, I had moments of that for sure growing up. I'm an actor by training and by birth practically. So I was always being silly, but I think mentally what I have struggled with most is like calming my thoughts. And I, I've been hearing about my female friends getting diagnosed with ADHD and they're 45 years old, 50 years old. And I always ask them, well, what are you eating? What's your dietary pattern? What makes you feel good? Do you notice any symptoms after you eat or before you eat? Have you checked your blood sugar regularly to see how your blood sugar is responding to the food you're eating? Because that impacts your mood. And I do that with my clients too as a personal trainer. But back to what you were saying, as far as speaking to the food or speaking to the land, speaking to the plants and the animals before you forage or before you hunt or gather, that's something that I've learned and been taught how to do as well. And it very much changes your relationship and your understanding of, you know, how people say we're all one human family. Well, I think we're all, like, all species are part of the same family too, in a way. Like, everything on Earth is related, like kind of what you were saying, where, this species of plant is, I'm obviously not a plant, but there's something about the relationship that I can cultivate with that plant, whether it's, the nourishment that it can provide me, or um, what can I offer the plant is something that I've learned to ask. How can I serve the plant? There's certain techniques on how to harvest and forage things so you allow the plant to reproduce. For example, if you pull it up by the roots, it's not going to grow back. But if you cut it off at a certain point, depending on the type of plant that you're harvesting, it'll continue to regrow. And so that's giving a gift to the plant while you're also taking a piece of it to nourish yourself. And so I really like that you've been able to harness that understanding for yourself, for your own mental health. And you've, been through a lot of different experiences where you didn't always have a choice, or maybe you didn't even know that you had a choice to make certain decisions about your nutrition or how to address your mental health. And one of the other things that I was thinking about and reflecting on when you were speaking was like, how many of us can go out and forage? How many of us live near an area that has stuff that we want to eat? How many of us have the time? Like, we don't all enjoy, like, for example, my dad, he doesn't like to garden. I love to garden, so I grow food. But he's just going to rely on someone else to provide him those things because he's just not interested, and he has other passions and other hobbies and other skills, right? And so I think about going back to talking to our food, if I don't have a choice and I have to eat that food from the grocery store, which we all do. Like, I don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't get food at a grocery store. I sit with my food before I eat it, and I I guess my intention is often to release any suffering that is in that food, whether it's a plant-based food or animal-based food. And I release it before it enters my body. This is my prayer, and my intention is like, okay, I don't know where you came from. I don't know what you've been through, but I release any suffering from that chain, because there's a long chain of things that happen for that food to get on my plate. It was planted into the ground, if it was a seed, and then it was watered, and then it was maybe sprayed with chemicals, and then it was harvested, and then it was transported, and then it was put in a freezer, or it was put in a refrigerator. And how many hands, how many you know, different machines touched it, it's impossible to know sometimes. And so I release that suffering from the food in the hands that touched it, because I want the people who provided me that food to also be nourished. I understand that there's a connection there. And, I could sit and worry about the food making me sick, but instead, just like you were saying, like, I'm making a conscious choice to shift my relationship and shift the energy with my intention of the food that I'm consuming, because I want that food to come in to my body and calm my mind and calm my heart and give me energy to do the things that are most important to me, whether it's, optimizing my metabolic health, because we always talk about that here, or like optimizing my spiritual health. There's so many different layers. So I just wanted to share that because you brought up so many different things that just really inspired me to share a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too that even with like folks not knowing, where their food came from, like how you're saying, it's just even giving that little bit acknowledgement brings you baby steps forward to the kind of health that you want for yourself and for your family. So even, no matter what kind of food you have in front of you, like what you're saying, and releasing that pain, but even just giving a moment of acknowledgement to say, I don't know where you came from, what you've been through. But also I pray for the folks that, had their hands on you. And I pray that they are nourished themselves and that they are, filled with different, I'm not even thinking of the word right now, but just different love and gratitude and whatnot into their lives as well to help reciprocate that, at least energy forward. Yeah, it's a good way.
Yeah, one word that I've been using more often lately is harmony. And, you know, diversity is a word that I think is overused. Like, we just depend on it and we don't really get creative beyond that. The reason I've been using harmony for myself lately is because I have to acknowledge that there are different energies everywhere, and there's going to be different energies in some food on my plate. And so my intention or my prayer is I I give this food the opportunity to harmonize with my body and my mind, because there are different vibrations, right? And so if I can't control how that cow was raised, or how that um, Brussels sprout was raised, at least I can approach my nourishment in a way that honors the differences in a positive way, instead of, again, like, fear and anxiety of like, oh my god, what is this food doing to me, where has it been, it's probably poisoned and I don't have a choice. And stepping away from that habit of being powerless, or the uh, abundance versus scarcity mindset. So I'm trying to step away from that habit of scarcity, like I don't have enough, or what I have is not good or optimal. Like, we all have to do what we can do with what we have. Like, however you say it, use what you have. And if you can't grow your own food, if you can't go out and hunt, if you can't go out and forage, that's okay. That doesn't mean you're just going to fail and die miserable and unhealthy. Um, so anyway, we could go on and on about that stuff, but was there anything else you wanted to talk about in that regard, or do you want to kind of shift into another subtopic?
um, let's see. Maybe we could go. Do you want to go into kind of the work that I've done with Piikani Lodge Health Institute?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So one of my questions that we had kind of prepared is your passion about research, specifically around ancestral nutrition. So now that we have a background of, your childhood and uh, experiences that you had that really inspired you to honor your health, mentally, physically, spiritually. I'd love to hear more about your research, which is how we originally met. Was you were presenting at the University of Washington, the Living Breath Indigenous Food Symposium back in 2022. I believe that was the year we met, right? It's been a while. And you were presenting your concept of an Indigenous food study that you were planning. And I thought it was brilliant and inspiring. And I'm always looking for Indigenous American food studies or evidence-based things because it's so relative to all people. The practice of working with the land and understanding the land where you live, and also going back and understanding your ancestry. And so that was awesome to see you do that presentation. And so I'd love for you to share what came of that. It was more of a concept and a proposal at the time, and then you were able to actually put that into action through a native diet study, and you can go forth and share what you can about that.
The study kind of came about when I started working for a program, a nonprofit based here on the Blackfeet Nation called Piikani Lodge Health Institute. And my mentor at the time, she was heavily dealing with some different illnesses herself. And then as well as seeing that how illnesses were within the community as well, and what she could do as far as trying to bring healthy data from a Blackfeet perspective using our own Blackfeet methodologies that we have used for thousands and thousands of years, and how we can work with Western science to kind of build a bridge of the two to address our chronic diseases, autoimmune diseases, mental health challenges, etc. And then also coming in with my background, what really inspired me to want to see the differences of how not only whole foods or traditional foods, how they would affect different mental health challenges or illnesses and whatnot, was the ACEs score, the child adversity kind of, that.
I think it's adverse childhood experiences.
Yep. Yeah. And so they have a set of questions, and judging by how much of that, I guess, the higher the score you are, the more it puts you into a statistical equation of saying that you will either, have these different chronic diseases like cancer, diabetes. You will have a more higher suicidal ideologies. You will be more susceptible to, these different mental health challenges like ADHD, anxiety, depression, things like that. And so when I took my score, it was very high. And then seeing that I was going to be put into this, pretty much in these statistics, I didn't want that to define me or to, be on this road of, okay, well, that's going to happen to me. And I guess my life is just going to be detrimental after this. So definitely didn't want that for myself. So when this project was presented, and when I was able to really hone in on what I wanted to do with my career and my idea of health and whatnot with the executive directors of Piikani Lodge Health Institute, of what she wanted to do as well with this goal. I definitely was all in. I wanted to heavily do this. And so what it was a research study of working with our community members, taking some of our Blackfeet community members and putting them on a traditional diet. So what does a traditional diet mean? So for our Blackfeet people, of course, we are in this area of, if you know where Glacier National Park is, we have the largest biodiversity in North America, beyond Alaska, British Columbia. So we have, elk, moose, grizzly bears, black bears, wolves, moose, many different birds, different insects and whatnot, bison. So that has always been in our diets, our plant medicines. We have over 200 to 300 edible plants and medicines, that a lot of that information has just become not necessarily lost, but it's just not as prevalent today as it was, 100 or so years ago. And so the process of myself wanting to get, still using myself as a guinea pig and wanting to really dive into this research. And so putting the research itself was, yes, having the community members on a traditional diet. And we wanted to do it for over around 14 weeks, 100 days, just to get the adequate change level in our A1Cs. So what they wanted to study was A1Cs, omega-3 versus omega-6s, cortisol, your stress levels, our different IgG, IgA, how sugar reacted into our blood, many different things of what we're looking at, how autoimmune disease affected us, and kind of how our body adjusted to different illnesses. And so they wanted to look at that. So seeing, a regular person going from their regular diet and then transitioning to only eating wild game to eating our berries that we have here, like our Savis berries, choke cherries, elderberries, many, many different other berries, huckleberries. And then also our root medicines like licorice, balsam, arrowleaf, and just many other different things, putting them on these different wild game and our traditional medicines, seeing how their bodies were affected by eating and consuming these different foods. But not only that, is how they were interacting with these foods as well. So taking different participants out. And it wasn't not only our participants, we did largely a lot of work within the community, working with K through 12, working with our school systems, working with different youth, different families, having, culture camps, summer camps, being involved with these different things. We were able to kind of work with a lot of different people in big groups. So taking them out to so Blackfeet Nation, we're hugged up right against Glacier National Park. And actually Glacier National Park, was our ancestral territory, as well as the Kootenays as well. But we, a large part of our lives were these mountains. We got all of our stories from these mountains. We were, we built our survival in there. Sorry, I'm not thinking of the word right now, but a lot of who we are and our people and our culture, our identity came from our mountains. And so when, settlers started to come in and really be intrigued into this area, and they saw our Glacier National Park as this huge moneymaker, machine pretty much. And especially with the railroad being built in, and Canada being right next door. Canada is about 30 miles away from us. So you could just hop right over the border. And then our other people that are part of our people, we have we're made up of 4 different bands. And so we were separated from our other bands, and we were forced to live down here. And then as well as we were pushed out of the park. It wasn't the park to us. It was our homelands. It was where we hunted. It's where, we did many, many different things. So being pretty much ripped out of that area. And even though that we are right next door to it, there's just this huge amount of disconnection just overall of a lot of difficulties with the park, difficulties with the rangers, a lot of different, racial things that are going on. Within our treaties, it was said that we were able to still hunt and fish, and gather necessities, amenities and whatnot to build homes and whatnot. When we tried to do these different practices, we were, our people were hindered on. We were, if we did go out and harvest some different things, rangers would come up and try to kick us out, take what plants or whatever that we've collected. Definitely, I don't remember the last time somebody has actually been able to fish or hunt in Glacier National Park. So definitely those things that were promised to us, they weren't actually fulfilled. It's getting a little bit better today with harvesting different plant medicines, but definitely it took a lot of energy and a lot of effort to be able to make sure that our people can still continue these practices within the park. So fast forward to us trying to build these relationships, and then getting our people kind of over that overwhelming sense of that they don't belong there, because they absolutely do. They absolutely do. So, we took, the different kids and families and bringing them into not only the park, but around throughout Blackfeet Nation, and even further down to our older ancestral grounds. We were able to have the community work with these different plant medicines and really feel the sensation of being with that land and reconnecting that relationship that was, forcibly removed. So that's a lot of the work that we did. And then, when the diet study came around, is that was the point of trying to not only see the numbers of how this food would affect them, but then also looking at how interacting with that food, like I said, working with those different plants, actually touching them, and then having to go home and process them, to clean them, take care of them, and then to also make food out of them too. To start to get more comfortable with working with these different foods, and then them being aware of like, oh, okay, this is how I feel after eating these different foods and working with these different foods. A large part of that, what I believe, is cell memory. And so when, us in this area, being that these are our ancestral homelands and this land holds a ton of memories and energy, and because of the disconnection that we have faced as a society, working with that, we believe that if you put the people back in the place, that those memories will start to come back, those different feelings. I think one of a cool thing was when I was working with a community member out on the land. I believe we were picking huckleberries, and there is, of course, lots of different plants out there. But as I was picking huckleberries, I hear my name, like, Kristen, can you come over here? I have a question. So I go over to her, and she asked me. She says, "What is this? What is this plant?" And I said, "Oh, that's princess pine." And we have these different with different plants that we would use for different areas of medicine. So there's a certain plants that we used for specifically smoking, or like cleaning our pipes out, or for different ceremony smoke, or relationship, whatever. So one of the princess pine, it's a waxy leaf. And what I was told is that we work with it with our knick, our bearberry. And so she asked me, she said, "What is this?" And so I was telling her about it. And she kind of stops me and she says, it was weird because I was sitting by this plant, and for some reason, images in my mind of smoking, of knick kept coming into my head. And I didn't know what that was. And I said, "That's it. That's cell memory right there. You're just around that plant. You're not necessarily even working with it. You're just looking at it. You're just by it. And already that cell memory is starting to come up." And so, a lot of that is that reconnecting with your identity, reconnecting with your culture, reconnecting with your land and food systems, was a huge part of that. And so that's what really, absolutely love, working with our community in that way, and to be able to, kind of get away from the hustle and bustle of life, of everything having to be on a certain time, and you have to be here and you have to do this. And just when you're out there with, yourself or with community members, and realizing that life isn't all about that chaos and things that we have to face every day to day life. Like sometimes it's just about living and being in that moment and seeing the type of health benefits that can come from that. And it's awesome.
Yeah, I just think, imagine if all of us took 20 minutes every day to touch the land that's around us and learn one thing about a plant that you know nothing about. Like, I live in the Pacific Northwest. Cedar trees are, our mascot practically. Cedar is a very powerful plant medicine, and I think a lot of people know, like, oh yeah, it's a cedar tree. If they don't know, they know of cedar. They know it exists. There's cedar made things, but I always imagine and kind of fantasize. I mean, I'm doing more foraging, plant walks, things like that, but I kind of fantasize, like, what if we all just did that? And it doesn't have to, oh, we don't have to quit our jobs. We don't have to like sell our cars and sell our homes and like live naked and
Yeah.
afraid sort of
Yeah.
thing. Like,
I'm
that's
not
not
living
what,
naked and afraid out here.
uh-uh. But I agree, there's so much power in these small moments that are really big moments. And if we just give ourselves the opportunity as humans to remember where we come from, and, most of us are not anywhere near where our ancestral lineage comes from. Like, majority of my family comes from Europe. And I think, what would it be like if I went back to certain areas that, they're probably cities now and towns, but what if I found a place outside of the city or town and just explored that natural territory? What would happen? And if I can't do that because it's expensive to fly across the world, I can do that here where I live and learn from the people who do know, or look at the parallels. Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I did go to Europe last summer, and I did go to some places where my ancestors are from, specifically Slovenia. And one of the things that resonated with me and was also just fact is there are a lot of similar plants over there that are here. And if you look back at pre-Christian spirituality or pre-Christian cultural practices in Eastern Europe, there are so many similar things, like to the T. I'm reading these books while I'm out there, and I'm going to museums and stuff, and I'm looking at how they would make canoes and how they would weave with plants to make baskets, and how they would celebrate the turn of the seasons. And I'm thinking, if I didn't have this context of being in Slovenia, I could send this photo to someone, like a native friend of mine or family in the US, and they'd probably ask me, oh, what tribe is that from? Because it was so similar in like that connection, that root of balance with nature, harmony with nature, acknowledgement, using what's around you instead of always like trying to be modern, right? Just be efficient and like buy the cheapest thing on the internet and get this sort of fake thing that doesn't ground us in our ancestry. And so anyway, I wanted to bring that up because it was very significant to me as someone whose ancestors don't come from this land, and how powerful it is, or can be, for anyone to reconnect with where we come from as humans,
Yeah. I think I get a lot of questions that I get after doing different talks, is that I get folks that come up to me and they ask the question of, well, if I'm European, or if I'm not a native that's connected to this land base, how do I connect with being outside? Or is it okay for me to learn about these different plant medicines? And of course, it definitely is okay to work with different plant medicines. I mean, there's so much there's so much information out there. Not a lot of it, of course, is written by Indigenous peoples, but largely there is. And it just takes looking. And so you'll find different information sources, whether it's, on the internet or through books or, especially just asking somebody is what I tell them is, go ahead and please immerse yourself in the education of what type of plants, are around you. But not only that, depending on where you live, I mean, all of North America was all Indigenous land. And so you are on somebody's land, no matter what. Even if you are in a city, you are still on someone else's land. Sometimes finding that connections to the people that are a part of that land, it does take some digging. It does, social media has made it so much easier for you to follow different folks, from different Indigenous homelands. And so that's made it really easy. So one thing that I like to tell people is, yes, go ahead and look for that knowledge, follow people in that area. Don't be afraid to ask questions. A lot of Indigenous folks are very open, not necessarily open about, different cultural things that are only supposed to be specific for their people. They're not going to open to you about that or, even invite you to ceremony, maybe not, but they will be open up about, the history of the land and, what has happened to their people and some of the things that they utilized and whatnot. And, yeah, you'd be surprised about the good relationship building that our tribal nations do want to connect with different outsiders or, folks living on their land to build those connections. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I think it goes back for me to that one human family. We all have our own, if you strip away the mess of modern stuff, I mean, not that all modern stuff is bad, but if you strip away the chaos, if you strip away the distractions, I think that we can all thrive if we become more understanding of other people's experiences. And if they have a lineage that goes back thousands of years in a particular area, like, they know what they're talking about. And there are so many ways that you can learn. And I think, podcasts are a great way to share information, books, blogs, Instagram, social media. And I mean, I've learned a lot about you just following you on Instagram. I love your posts and I love seeing your dogs outside and you going out on plant walks and going out in like -degree weather
Yeah.
because you're hardcore. But anyway, yeah, I think that we have an abundance of resources, we have an abundance of knowledge, and we have an abundance of medicine, whether that's mental, physical, spiritual. And so I really appreciate you sharing all of the stuff. I mean, your personal experiences, your professional experiences in research. So I actually, let's see, let me look at my little notepad here. So you were talking about how you got the folks together to go forage and identify plants, and they were eating that too. So the relationship that they were developing with, where it came from was one kind of impact. But then can you talk about how people were fed? Like, was this controlled where they only ate this particular type of food for, did you say 14 weeks? Or was it like majority? How did that work, if you can share?
Yeah. So I built a menu plan that both integrates our traditional foods, like our plant medicines, our berries, wild game, and then as well as our whole foods too. So 14 weeks on 100 days is a long time to keep someone on a very, very strict diet. And so we did open up, what we called it was the Northern Plains traditional diet. So that not only included the foods that we had in our area ancestrally, but also the foods that were either that we traded with. So being that we've been in this area for thousands and thousands of years, of course, we had all of these different trading systems that we would make with other tribal nations. And then also we had different foods too that we no longer have. Like one of them is salmon. We had salmon in this area for a very long time, up until just a few years ago. So we included we included salmon into the diet. We included some different squashes, some different beans, that probably came from like the three affiliated tribes. We did try to kind of stay away from, more southern foods, but we did still implement some different squash and beans and whatnot, just to kind of give that a little bit of variety. It wasn't a food that we used week to week, but it was something that we definitely had within the menu plan itself. And so also I wanted to make the menu plan so that it was not only easy to follow, but that it would be not a huge transition. So like if we're having, like bison tacos, you're still utilizing like like the seasonings that go into taco meat, paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, in which actually, ancestrally we've had onions, garlic, things like that, and different spices and herbs. So utilizing those different foods to help implement into our traditional foods. So yeah, like if we were eating those bison tacos, being able to use those seasonings, but still having the wild game that we're sticking to. And then, having to use whole foods like lettuce wraps or something like that. And so trying to make it easy to follow. And then not only that, some of the folks that were a part of the study, some of them didn't necessarily know how to not only cook, I guess, but cooking with like our wild game and whatnot was very different to their palate. And so utilizing the foods, our seasonings that we use today, and making sure that that these foods will be palatable to them. So yeah.
So you mentioned earlier your intentions as far as what you were hoping to see as results, right? Metabolic health markers to improve ultimately. And I know you can't share the data yet, but could you say maybe the percentage of the native diet that was introduced? Like what were people eating, like half whatever they had at home and half of what you provided? Or could you control for that?
We provided all the foods. So we were able to have the funding to provide everything that was listed on the menu plan. But so a lot of like the berries or the medicines was harvested by myself or my family. We would go out and do that. And then I think the study itself, it took Dane over 3 years to finally actually get to the study itself. So it took a lot of work with our Blackfeet Nation Institutional Review Board, who reviews all the research to be able to work with human subjects within our tribal nation. So it took a lot of work to get that passed with them, to get funding to be able to provide for this food, and then also us harvesting a lot of the food as well. And so we also, like me and my family, we utilized our treaty rights to be able to hunt in the Yellowstone area, where we were able to hunt a bison, elk, and utilize that for the study as well. And so yeah, we provided all of the foods, as well as like if we needed things like spinach, kale, parsley, things like that. We bought everything and provided it for the participants, so they didn't need to buy anything themselves. And a lot of the times we gave them extra food, so sometimes they were feeding their family members. And then not only that, is that there was such a kind of a broad way of how these foods were implemented on the menu, that it would be easy for their family to follow as well. And so the wild game might have been like a little bit hard to get a hold of, but our stores here provide buffalo meat as well. So if families wanted to be able to provide meals for their family, they could just go out and get a couple packages of wild game and utilize that same recipes, the same foods, and still eat according to how they were eating as well.
So did you create a recipe book?
I created a recipe book for the participants, yes, and for the community up here.
Cool. And is that available or is that
It
wrapped up,
will.
locked up?
It's kind of wrapped up, locked up right now with Piikani Lodge Health Institute. I know that they will be releasing all the different items, the menu plan, recipes, the data, what came from the study, and all of that soon as it's published. But right now, it's kind of locked up at the moment.
Okay. All right. Let's see. What else? Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, or?
We could go into Backpackers Ferry really quick
Okay.
if you want to.
Cool. Yeah. So, in addition to the research that you do, you co-own the Backpackers Ferry. So, tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're a transportation shuttle tourism business based on the east side of Glacier National Park. So a lot of folks kind of get it. They're not really aware of their surroundings when they come here. I mean, this place is such a sought after place to come vacation, hike, to get away or such. People from all over the world come here year after year. And don't realize how huge Glacier National Park is itself. So we have a west and an east side. Over on the west side, it has more, amenities, you could say. It is closer to bigger towns, whereas the east side of Glacier Park is more rural. It's where the Blackfeet Nation resides. And within the Blackfeet Nation, I guess you could say the reservation is that it has different communities within it. So when you're first coming over to the east side, it takes about an hour and a half to get over there from the west side. So you're going through a mountain pass. So all of the airports and whatnot are on the west side. So over here on the east side, being more rural, and on the reservation, we have these different communities that different folks can interact with and such. But most of the people that come over here and visit, they interact with alongside the mountains, alongside Glacier Park, up to the Canadian border. So that includes East Glacier, the St. Mary's area, Bab, Duck Lake area. And then they're not necessarily going into the more, where I guess the headquarters of the reservation, of where a lot of the tribal people are living at, cosiding at, and that is Browning, and then Heart Butte, Blackfoot area, Two Medicine area. They're not necessarily interacting with much. And now a lot of businesses, there's not much for shuttle businesses in the area. So you can get here through train, or you could take a plane and jump off on the west side, but then you would need a ride over here. So we are one of 2 or 3 shuttle businesses in the area right now. And so we provide transportation services from the different train stations, planes, airports, and whatnot. And the thing that we heavily work with is a lot of our outdoors enthusiasts. So a lot of folks come in here to either day trek, day hike, or to plan lawn visits where they're trying to get to different trailheads. And so a lot of the folks that we work with are called Continental Divide Trail hikers, CDT, or PNT, Pacific Northwest Trail hikers. And so these folks start all the way from Mexico, and they're hiking, 3,100 miles all the way up here. Now in our home, is where they either finish their journeys or they start their journeys. And so generally around it's called the Chief Mountain. It's one of our very holy mountains that is protected, but it is, we call it Nanastaku. and it's where they start and end their journeys. And so being that these different outsiders are coming in and exploring our area, we wanted to make sure that we wanted to provide safe and reliable transportation to these folks, but also we wanted to provide them education around our people, this area, this land, the significance of it, and give the real story of what's happened between Glacier National Park and the tribal people here. So that's a large part of our work. And then we heavily integrate. So me and my partner, he's worked a lot with the buffalo here that we have within Blackfeet Nation. And then myself, a large part of working with the community and working with our natural sciences, working with our traditional plants and medicines and looking at the phenology of what's going on. I mean, if you come to this area, you might not notice that. You might think that climate change has no effect on this area. It's so beautiful, lush, and green, but it has significant impact on our land, on many different species, our animals, our plants, our waters, everything. And that has such a huge ongoing effect of what's going on with our community and our health and the health of the land. And so using that time when folks are in our car, generally a lot of the rides, it takes, hour and a half to get to certain trailheads. And so you have this time to be with these different folks that are interested in the area or maybe are completely ignorant to natives themselves, ignorant to the outdoors, to I guess what they would call wilderness, and to really be able to educate them on the happenings, to kind of have them step out of their normal perspective of their everyday lives, and then to help them realize of what's going on in not only our area, but kind of how to be able to also disconnect and to start thinking of, I guess, other things beyond themselves, and their own crazy lives and whatnot. Glacier National Park and our home itself is so significant into the area, is that we are 3 out of the 7 watersheds. We hold 3 of the watersheds that go all the way through North America. So what happens up here trickles down to what happens throughout North America. And so being able to provide the education of the different programs and projects, this place itself is such a very environmental, sciencey place, a very natural science place. And so we're constantly working with the land, our animals, the bears, the bison, the fish, the streams, what's going on with droughts and whatnot. So yeah, being able to provide that education and that connection when folks come here, and to give them just kind of a different idea, because a lot of we've gotten Blackfeet Nation as people have gotten this bad rap of being an unsafe place, of being scary, I guess. And that's not our story. It's a story that's put on us by different border towns that are, rooted in racism and unaccepting of trying to build relationships with our tribe and other tribal nations throughout Montana. So being able to tell our story from our point of view is very, very important. And that's the services that we provide, along with, a huge amount of transportation there's not much transportation in the area. So, yeah.
I would say that's a huge gift that you're offering, in addition to the ability for people to travel across that land. Like you said, people come from all walks of life. They have varying degrees of knowledge about that land and the history. And I just want to say thank you to you and your team that you care enough, number one, 2, that you're knowledgeable, and 3, that you want to share that knowledge with people, because you don't have to. You could just be a taxi service. And I think that is just really awesome that you're taking advantage of this opportunity to serve, to serve your people, to serve your community, but also to serve outsiders, people who, appreciate the land, or want to learn more about it. and everybody comes for different reasons, but I think they probably leave with similar understandings, right? A collective understanding of what the truth is about the history and what the truth is about present day issues or concerns, you know? So I know I've told you several times I want to come out and visit. So I will. I don't know when yet, but just learning about all that is really inspiring. And, you know, I'm a Montana girl at heart too. So anytime I can get out there, I will. I've driven through a lot. I've never gone that far up north on my journeys because I usually drive on 90. But yeah, that would be so cool to come out and experience that. So, as far as seasons, do people come out there all seasons to the park and to that area? Or obviously, summer is probably the most popular, but do you have shuttle service year round?
That's definitely something we want to go into, especially pushing on the ecotourism side. Is that right now, I mean, it's a ghost town right now. I mean, our winters are can be insane. We get down to -40, -50 below, you know, and it's a very harsh winter. So not a lot of folks like to come here during that time. We do get some folks that come up here for cross country skiing, snowshoeing, things like that. But yeah, our busy season generally is from May to October. But yeah, we do want to extend services into the wintertime because there are folks that do come here for other outdoor activities. But right now we're in the process of working on our outfitting license to be able to provide those services year round.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. I can't even imagine what I would wear in 40 below. Like, how do you even go outside? Is it
Oh,
possible?
it's still possible. It's definitely still possible. We actually had this guy that was, it's like a few miles out of East Glacier, and he walked up to he summited a mountain called, we call it Summit, whatnot, but he summited that area and it actually made news. I'm not sure about national news, but he went up there and it was -60 degrees. And it looked like he was just wearing regular, just regular winter coat and regular winter pants and whatnot. But I mean, all of us, we all know how to bundle up and stay nice and insulated and warm. And especially if we're outside doing whatever we need to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm I'm trying to think the coldest weather I've ever been in, and I probably was in 0 degree weather once or twice, maybe in Montana or Idaho, but I can't prove it. Like, I don't remember. I was really young, probably, and yeah, because I've never been to Alaska, and yeah, I worry about my face or your face. I worry about your face, Kristen. Like, how does your skin not freeze and crack? And like, I think of those terrible movies where people freeze out in the cold and
Yeah.
their faces turn into glass, and I don't know. You just know how to do it, I guess.
You just know how to do it.
You'll have to teach me someday.
Yeah, I'll have to put out a video of everything you're supposed to wear when it's gets negative below.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been talking for a while. Um, there's just a couple more questions I have for you while I have you here.
Yeah.
Um, so a little bit back to the research. Do you have plans for the future? Do you want to do another study? If you do, how would you change it? Or do you want to do something totally different? I'm just curious if you have any future plans or future fantasies of what you could do with your research passion.
Yeah. I would love to integrate myself into more research. Um, However, my thought process, especially during the what would you call this, the term that we're currently in,
Mm.
yeah, as far
Presidential
as
term.
yeah, the presidential term that we're currently in and how there is funding cuts being done absolutely everywhere. A lot of research is being cut as well. However, this is what I think, and no, I'm pretty sure that we know, is that we know that these different processed foods are hindering our health. We're starting to really understand that, and starting to understand that it's leading to all these different diseases, illnesses, etc. And we have, a good idea of that our whole foods, our natural foods, even store-bought or from the land or gardened or so, are better for us. So being that we know this, and that we don't necessarily have as much funding that's going to be coming in for research, I think it's time, like for myself, is to really just hone in on that education and start being able to spread that education. Social media, I haven't been much of a fan with it, just because I don't agree with a lot of the ways that people condemn themselves on social media. So it's kind of kept me away, but I'm starting to really realize that that's going to be a way to get out the knowledge that I have in a big way. And so I've done a lot of community work here, and I will continue to do community work where I am working in schools, working with families, working with different knowledge camps and whatnot, to continue to bring folks out on the land, to continue to provide that education, and then also to really work on how natural ways of wellness and how we can get away from these different toxic things that we get ourselves into, drugs, alcohol, toxic relationships and such, to then trying to switch the mind frame of being able to bring in these positive impacts that will help us long term, whether it's baby steps or such. And so I am going to be working on a book, though, where I am providing recipes and a meal plan of how to integrate our different traditional foods and different whole foods and whatnot, and then how to being able to find wellness. And so I want to be able to start vlogging and to really get out there about the ways that throughout my experience and working with my different mental health challenges, working through trauma, working with ongoing trauma, working on healing practices and such, and having to do that in a natural way, no matter where you are out in the world. And then, yeah, especially I would love to connect with other tribal nations that are looking to either develop this research on their own or to start to integrate these practices within their tribal nations. That is a way that I want to also be working as well, and really just trying to get this information out of how to do these different practices. And no matter what background you come from, no matter if you grew up with absolutely no knowledge around wellness or nutrition or things like this, or if you have maybe given a different perspective of how to approach wellness and whatnot. So yeah, that's how I'd like to get out my work, and then especially continuing our work with Backpackers Ferry and seeing where that grows. And I hope the business grows into other national parks, because the information around tribal nations, every national park has been taken away from a tribal nation. And so to have people being able to voice who they are, I think is very, very important. So.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So as far as jumping back into nutrition and stuff, I think it's relative to being the sense of empowerment, right? And the sense of building community. If you could give our viewers and listeners some suggestions or advice on, what's one or two things that we could do to start to explore our health, right? If we know that there's something wrong, and you and I are of the mindset that food is medicine, food is so powerful, what would you recommend to someone who might not have the same resources that you have or I have, but they have the interest, they have their why? As a coach, as a trainer, I always say, what's your why? They have a really deep rooted purpose or intention, and like, okay, I've been dealing with this for a long time, I'm ready to make a change. In regards to food, How would you recommend somebody go about that? Like if they can't empty out their whole pantry and empty out their whole kitchen and go get a whole new stuff of supplies, what are some simple steps that people could take in their daily lives to maybe just honor their health with the resources that they have?
Yeah. Um, my suggestion always is baby steps. When I first started getting into knowledge around food and nutrition, the the whole overview of it seems so overwhelming. It seemed like, oh, I had to throw everything out and I had to start with here and start with this. What I would start with is baby steps, is even if it's one meal per day, integrating something green in, integrating maybe a tea in, some safe teas that I say that are usually safe for a lot of folks, especially folks that have medications, pregnant, or, whatever is going on with their bodies. Some safe ones are like peppermint, chamomile, dandelion are just some like easy ones to start off with. You don't have to even know even a little. I guess you could literally just if you are dealing with different illnesses or whatnot, my suggestion is to really look up first what your illness is about, um, and really look into kind of the symptoms of what's going on with you. Or even if you're just a person that is tired of feeling sluggish, tired of feeling overwhelmed, irritable throughout the day, is starting really small. In the morning is the first thing. As soon as you wake up, even if you're clouded with negative thoughts or such, to find something to be grateful. Gratitude goes a long, long way. Even if it's hard to find things to be grateful for, there is always at least one thing to be grateful for. And so start to build that foundation. And trust me, the universe will catch on to you wanting to learn, and the universe will provide more education. It will provide people, like all of a sudden you'll meet new people that you never thought you would meet, and they provide this education to you that you never thought you would. So starting small, starting with, some small teas to drink throughout the day, maybe skipping a coffee or an energy drink and providing, drinking a mint tea, or, eating some good fats and proteins in the morning to help that brain. A lot of times we get this high spike of cortisol early in the morning. And we kind of, get shaky. We're like, I have to do this. I have to be here, and we're already setting ourselves up to crashing. And so we get that high cortisol, and then we're finding ourselves in the middle of the day crashing. And then we're not, you know, we're not going after the more healthy things. We're kind of going after what's right in front of us. But even if there's, throughout your day, if you add, don't ever say take away anything. I always say add something. So add some spinach, add some parsley. Parsley is so, so good for you. And you could add it on to so many different foods. And between that and maybe transitioning one of your drinks per day to a tea in the morning or a tea before you go to bed, in the long run, that has so many different health benefits. And you're just going to keep adding on from there. But definitely start off with baby steps, and just try implementing and adding things. Playing,
Yeah.
especially experimenting, play with it. Don't be overwhelmed. I mean, it's hard to not get overwhelmed, but play with it. Play with
Yeah.
different things. Yeah.
I always say have fun, enjoy it. If you really want to make a change, change things that you do, more things that you enjoy, right? It's not about always this restriction mindset of I can't have this that I love. I can't have that I love. Well, what do you love that nourishes, truly nourishes your mind and your body? And we know, like, it's difficult if you do eat mostly ultra processed foods. Sure, it's almost like there's a really heavy layer of like a wall or a curtain or something where we might feel okay and not be aware of some of the symptoms we're experiencing because we're so used to and adapted to these ultra processed foods. But if you start to bring in one little thing at a time that is new, that you do enjoy, like I always say, don't force feed yourself. If you hate spinach, if it makes you want to gag, don't eat it. I don't care how good a food is for you. You got to make those changes with things that are appealing and that you desire. And I really like what you said, Kristen, about the fat and protein in the morning, because that is going to, one, it's going to satiate you longer than some ultra processed food that's probably mainly made of carbohydrates and sugar. And it's also going to stabilize your blood sugar and your insulin. And since diabetes and high blood pressure seem like everybody I know has one of um, those are both rooted in food. They're much more dietary conditions than a lot of people are told. A lot of people are just given drugs, but I am all on board about fat and protein for breakfast. Really throughout the day, whenever you have a meal, make sure there's fat and protein there. And fat's gotten a bad rap, and I'm always trying to undo that by helping people understand that fat is actually a helper nutrient to healthy insulin. If we want to have healthy insulin levels, fat is our friend. You don't have to drink it, or guzzle, a jug of olive oil, even though I've joked about it in the past where I kind of want to because it's one of my favorite things. But yeah, those baby steps and just using what you have and knowing and trusting that the more you call out, put out that intention to the universe, the more it will come to you, like when you least expect it, probably. So, yeah.
Yep. And then just even whatever meal's in front of you, just to acknowledge it a little bit, just to think about where did you come from, or, who provided for you, or this or that. And also folks that are, I like what you're saying is fat has gotten a bad rep. And I think when you're trying to transition into a different diet, to not necessarily look at calories, fat, but to look at your sugars and if the list of ingredients is long and you can't read it, maybe look for something else that you can read, or a lower sugar amount or a lower sodium amount. But I wouldn't pay attention to that fat or to those calorie limits. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that some of the there's a yogurt, or no, there's a non-dairy milk that says like high fat oat milk. And from a distance, you're like, oh, I'm trying to eat more fat. I'm going to get that. But then you look at the ingredients and it's rapeseed oil, which is a seed oil. And that's the fat that I'm not okay with. Because, yeah, it's true. There's good fat and bad fat. But maybe I'll put a link in the show notes about the differences to help people understand that, animal fats are generally really good for you. I mean, we lived off of them for millions of years as a human species, and people weren't dying of heart attacks and things like that. But now that we've substituted with cheaper fats like canola oil, rapeseed oil, hydrogenated oil, soybean oil, all that stuff, it's caused a lot of health problems. So anyway, I'll put something in there, or if you have something, Kristen, that you like to hand out to people or refer people to online, we can put in any of the information you have. And what's next for you? I think that's kind of my closing question is, I know you shared that you'd like to collaborate more with other tribes, you'd like to do another research study, but until that happens, there's a lot of unknowns right now. And so I'm just curious, it's going to be spring on Thursday, and I don't know if the weather starts to change for you guys, but what are you planning to work on over the next few months, whether it's personal, professional, your metabolic health, mental, physical?
Yeah. Health wise, one of the things I've been working on, and especially being within the study, is really learning about my female hormones and learning out how to balance them, and how working with these different foods and medicines, how they help with my ADHD and other mental health challenges. I want to be the best mom, the best spouse, the best version of myself for myself as well, and for my community as well. So really always making sure that I am keeping myself as healthy as what I'm trying to project out. I never want to be a person that doesn't talk the talk, walk the walk. I want to make sure that I am doing those things, and that what I am saying is coming from a place of heavy experience. And a lot of that, I want to get that information out to folks about the steps that I've been taking to balance out my hormones, to helping with my own cortisol levels, and what that has done significantly for my brain health, for my own metabolic health. And then, of course, it's almost time for tourism season, so making sure that I'm sharp and ready for different outsiders to come in. And especially with this different administration, it might be a little bit difficult working with outsiders and their perspectives, and just making sure that I'm giving the good knowledge that needs to be out there. And also working on getting out there more myself too, because I think over this last few years, I've been really just in my community, and really just strictly working with community members. That's the most important to me before spreading this knowledge out to everyone. But I'm finding that it needs to be out there, and that we need to take care of ourselves, and that especially with this administration, we greatly need to take care of ourselves, and we need to be working in communities, and we need to be making these relationships. So yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say, like, with your endeavors and with your passions and things like that, how can we support you is my question. Whether we're just a viewer of the Magic of Metabolic Health podcast, or, me as an acquaintance of yours, and I'm really supportive of your endeavors, like mentally, emotionally, but like, how can we help? Whether it's supporting your next study or Backpackers Ferry, we can put the link to your website. Do people just book on the website when they need a ride?
Yeah, you'll either book on the website or just call me or my partner, and you just get us to talk to and to work through things.
Oh, so we get to
Yeah.
talk to humans
Yeah, you get to talk to
to
humans.
book a ride.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I think too, as a lot of folks come here and they think that everything's close in walking distance, but don't realize that it takes an hour to 2 hours to drive to certain places that they want to go to, that's been on their bucket list. So having someone to talk to, to explain to you about the area, about how long it will take, about how long maybe your trail will take, and really just getting a real perspective from somebody that is here. It helps out the traveler so much with being overwhelmed in their travel plans and what to do, where to stay, those types of things. So a way to support my work is not only to follow my social media, which I can leave with you to take or to put out, but yeah, I mean, coming and visiting, if you've ever wanted to come and visit Glacier National Park or the surrounding area, absolutely would love to come out, talk with you, explain the area, help provide that information and such, future work to have it shared, especially if I start vlogging, and then as well as when I come out with these different writings, just to have folks be aware and then wanting to share. And yeah, and then I mean, I would love to go out and talk to different communities, to other institutions or such. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we can contact you if we want to bring you into our community. Um, I guess we'll put your do you want to just share your email here and your Instagram, but I can also put it in the show notes if you want.
Yeah. So it's Meeko, MEEKO _31 is where you'll find me, or just search my name, Kristen Falcon. Um, and then as well as provide my website, which is backpackersferry.com, or my email, kristenmarie.cf@gmail.com.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kristen. I'm really glad we got to make this work after all that time and juggling schedules and you doing your study and it's so much work. So I really appreciate you taking time out today to talk with me and our listeners. So, and thanks to our listeners and our viewers for joining us today. Please connect with us. Make a comment here, send us a question. Kristen is available. You know, she's very knowledgeable and resourceful. And if you're planning a summer trip, go to Backpackers Ferry. Check them out. You can schedule a educational shuttle ride. And yeah, and oh, I also wanted to remind people that if you are in a place in your life where you are ready to make some changes for the betterment of your metabolic health, I am available for a virtual consultation as a personal trainer. My website is primitivepulsefitness.com. And of course, you get a free consultation so we can determine if, you know, my services are a good fit for you. But yeah, so thanks for watching the Magic of Metabolic Health podcast. My name is Amelia, and we are the Magic of Metabolic Health. Thank you for being part of our village, and we'll see you next time. We're bringing healthy back. Them other bros don't know about the facts.